Hello there, Year 4. Hope you're all doing really well. It is our final science lesson of home learning. So let's crack straight into it. We're going to be continuing our work that we were doing last week on food chains. So our WALT today is to construct a food chain using provided information. What I would like you to do first is pause the video. Can you go through and look at our knowledge quiz? And then we'll go through the answers together. Off you go. Okay, so let's go through and have a look at some of those answers. Take a second to pause the video now if you'd like to mark these. So a food chain shows how energy is transferred. Question 2, what a living thing that makes its own food called? It's called a producer. A consumer is something that eats other plants and or animals. An animal that's hunted and eaten is prey. An animal that does the hunting, eating, and killing is a predator. Then going back to last unit on sound, sound is measured in decibels. And then going back to last year, name the apparatus which lets you see things that are not in direct line of sight is a periscope. And we made some of those last year, if you remember. So, what I'd like you to do, please, is pause the video. Remind me, we looked at food chains last week. What are food chains and what do they show us? What are food chains and what do they show us? Okay, pause the video now and have a think. Okay, so hopefully you've had a chance to have to think about what food chains are. So, food chains show us what plants and animals eat and are also eaten by, and how energy is transferred to living things. So here we have an example of a very basic food chain here. Again, pause the video. What information can you gather from this food chain? What information can you gather from this food chain here? So there's quite a lot of information we can get, even though there are only 3 living things in this food chain. So the information that we can gather is that the energy, that grass, because it's a producer, gets its energy from the sun. That energy is then transferred onto the grasshopper when the grasshopper eats it as the primary consumer, and that the grasshopper's energy is then transferred to the frog, who is the secondary consumer. So remember, it goes primary consumer, secondary consumer, and then can go to tertiary consumer as well. So, for the first task, we're just going to do a bit of a review on food chains. So, below there are 4 living things that belong in a food chain. So we have a heron, a grasshopper, grass, and a frog. What I'd like you to do is order these plants and animals into the blank food chain below. So those of you that have the sheet, you'll have this blank this blank food chain here that you can use for the labels to go at the bottom. If you don't have it, no problem at all. You can just draw it yourself on a bit of paper, which is absolutely fine. So what I'd like you to do is order and draw these animals into the blank food chain together. So that's the first thing that you're going to do. So for example, if you thought, if you thought that the heron goes first, you can put it there, and grasshopper, grass, frog, whichever order you think. Once you've then drawn a picture and put and labeled the animal's name, your second task is, can you label them producer, primary consumer, secondary consumer, and tertiary consumer as well. So can you put these animals into a food chain, please? Okay, pause the video now. Off you go. Okay, so let's see how you got on. Hopefully this is what you got here, a food chain that looks a bit like this. So of course grass is what gets its energy from the sun, so is the producer. The grasshopper then takes on, the energy is then transferred to the grasshopper, who is the primary consumer, then to the frog, who is the secondary consumer, and then finally the heron, who is the tertiary consumer. So, I love this picture. Today you are going to be making your own food chains based upon information. And here you can really see a food chain in action. You've got the heron who's eating the fish, who is also eating another fish there. So it's a lovely sort of picture of a living food chain. So you're going to be making your own food chains based upon information. So I'm going to switch around to my visualizer here. So here I've been given a paragraph with some information on and 4 living things that I need to put into my food chain. So let's read it. The sun transfers its energy to the kelp. This energy is then transferred to the sea urchin. Sea otters then eat the sea urchin. Finally, the killer whale obtains its energy from the sea otter. So what we need to do is put these into a food chain. So we're going to need pictures and labels as well. So the first thing I need to do, the first sentence is, the sun transfers its energy to the kelp. Now, do we need to put the sun into the food chain? No, we don't. Although it does provide the energy, and it's where the energy starts, it starts from, we don't need the sun in the food chain. We're only doing the living things in the food chain. So the first thing that the sun transfers its energy to is the kelp. So you can draw yourself a very simple picture. So this is the kelp here, as we can tell, which is sort of a kind of weed that grows in the water. It does not need to be that artistic. I apologize, I'm not like Miss Boots, I'm afraid. So that will do me just fine. And then I'm going to label it kelp. And also, so if it gets its energy from the sun, what does that mean it is? Is it going to be a producer, a consumer? It's going to be a producer because it produces its own energy from the sun. There we go. So next, I'm going to draw my arrow, which signifies the transfer of energy. So the energy being transferred. There we go. So let's read the next bit. This energy, so talking about the kelp, is then transferred to the sea urchin. So the energy from the kelp is transferred to the sea urchin. So I can use the pictures above to help me identify. So I know this is the kelp, this is the killer whale, that's the sea otter. So that's the sea urchin over there, a very spiky animal that lives on the seabed. So I'm just going to do a very basic red ball. Almost looks like a red sun. And label that one sea urchin. And if the sea urchin consumes the producer and gets its energy from the producer, what does that mean it is? It's a consumer of some type. What is it going to be? What type of consumer? It is a primary consumer. There we go. So now we need to do our arrow. We're halfway there with our food chain. So again, I'm going to do this arrow that shows the transfer of what? I want you to call this out. So the arrow signifies the transfer of 3, 2, 1, energy. Next, sea otters then eat the sea urchin. So that is really nice and clear. So sea otters then eat the sea urchin. So the energy from the sea urchin is transferred to the sea otter, which I'm going to draw lying on its stomach, looking very happy in the water, just eating a lovely sea urchin. Kind of looks like a bear, but that is fine. When you guys do this, I'm sure it's going to be artistically beautiful. I'm just going to keep it really, really nice and basic for the moment, for the sake of time. Okay, there's my otter. So again, I'm going to label it sea otter. And can you tell me what kind of label it needs to be given. So we've got the producer, the primary consumer, and then we have just like with schools, it goes primary, then secondary consumer. There we are. Excellent. And then just one more label. If you run out of room like I have here, it's no problem at all. You can always make it go round in a kind of rectangular shape. So again, the arrow symbolizes the transfer of what? The transfer of energy. And our last sentence. Finally, the killer whale obtains its energy from the sea otter. So poor happy sea otter over here is going to be consumed by the killer whale, which now I will just draw really quickly. Whoops. And then we can leave 2 white bits here. There we go. And then we can shade this in black, which I'm not going to do right now, just because I am a little short for time. So killer whale. And now, can you remember what sort of consumer is going to come after the secondary consumer? Hold it in your head. 3, 2, 1. Tertiary consumer. So that's Tertiary, tertiary consumer. Excellent. And the killer whale, that would mean it is the predator as well. So there is my questionably drawn food chain, but it still makes complete sense, and it does the job that we need it to do, which is showing the transfer of energy between these living things. So what I would like you to do, please, on your sheet is task 2. Can you create a food chain using the information below? So just like me, you've got 4 pictures that represent 4 living things. Your paragraph is down here, so I'd like you to read that yourself. So this gives you all the information of which order the food chain should go, and also the names of all of the living things if you can't recognize what some of these 4 things are. So firstly, create the food chain using the information below. Make sure you then label the plant and animal names. And C, can you then label them producer, primary consumer, secondary consumer, and tertiary consumer? So I'm expecting some really, really beautiful food chains here. Okay, so pause the video now. Okay, guys, so hopefully that means that you've finished your first, you finished your food chain. Right, let's move on to the next bit. So this is your challenge, and this is your chance to be a little bit creative. So I would like you to create your own food chain using whichever plants and animals you want. And also you can present it in whatever way you want. Some of you might want to do it, be really artistic and do some really great detailed drawings of this. Some of you, I know from what I've seen on Seesaw, are really have really good computer skills and might want to do one on there. Either way, be creative, make your own food chain using whichever plants and animals you want. Make sure that you include the plant and animal names, very important. Some nice vibrant pictures, whether they've been printed from the computer or whether they've been drawn yourself. The relevant producer and consumer labels. Neat arrows to show the transfer of energy. And then, of course, if you'd like to, you can put predator and prey labels. Remember, what does predator mean again? So a predator means it hunts other animals. And prey, what does that mean? That means that it is an animal that is hunted by other animals. So you can create a really, really lovely food chain there. So that is your task. Pause the video now and give that a go. Right, guys, so hopefully that means that you have now created a really fantastic, beautiful food chain using whichever animals and plants that you would like. I'm really, really looking forward to seeing this. I know that we've got a lot of artistic skill and flair in our in our school and in year 4 in particular. So I'm really looking forward to seeing these on Seesaw, guys. Right, thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed that lesson on food chains. And I will look forward to seeing you on Monday. Bye, guys.